It is the Fantasy Life Show here on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. Adam Ronis and Gene Clemons here for the next 2 hours. Kendall Valenzuela still away on vacation. She should be back next week. If not, Gene, I'll give you a call. You could come back and maybe we just take this over.
But, dude cast.
Right? There we go.
Dude cast. Sorry, Kendall. Enjoy your time abroad, I guess. But it's a dude cast today. We're in the building.
That's right. So make sure you stay tuned and make sure you check us out, fantasylife.com. Our fantasy football draft kit is already churning out content. It is never too early to prepare to dominate your fantasy football drafts in 2025. We have early rankings. We have dynasty coverage. We have Dwayne McFarland's rookie models for tight ends, receivers, running backs, quarterback, and running back receiver draft profiles from Thor Nystrom, breakouts and sleepers. So we got a ton of content there, so make sure you check it out. We're going to cover a lot of the free agency signings, the trades. We'll also have Gene Clemons' latest mock draft, which you can find on fantasylife.com. But Gene, it's been a while. You know, we finally got to meet at Radio Row, and that's over a month ago. So how's life treating you right now?
You know, life is good. Life is good. It never stops. There's always something next, right? So after the Super Bowl, it was right into into recruiting, or not really recruiting, but, into evaluations for the draft and, turning out that draft coverage. Also, NCAA tournaments going on right now, the men's and the women's tournament. Both of my Cinderellas got out of the first round. Drake fell yesterday, but on the women's side, South Dakota State still alive, have a really good opportunity. But probably are going to lose this week. I mean, this game as well, because I believe they have UConn coming up or something like that. So it's always fun to not only just focus on football, but all of the sports that we love. And there's so many similarities in it that it makes it a lot of fun to differentiate. But football is the main thing, and we right back here because right around the corner is the draft, and I know everybody's excited about all of the free agent moves that have happened already.
Yeah, definitely a lot going on. Like you said, NCAA tournament going on. So Florida and UConn right now, that's a tight battle and a half. So, we always keep an eye on things. Obviously, I'm still heavy into the NBA betting. So we just are all around taking care of business, multiple sports. But yes, football is the focus here. So let's kick it off with Jameis Winston. The Giants signed him to a 2-year, $8 million contract. There's incentives that can get the money even higher. But what are your thoughts here on Winston going to the Giants? Is it a good move? And is he going to be the starter this year for them?
Well, I wrote about it in my my Good, Great, and Ugly that I do for New York Giants on SI. And then I also talked about it on my Giant Issue podcast. The idea that this is not a great move, or that somehow this means that the Giants are not trying to win, is just foolhardy. This might be one of the best receiving cores as a whole that Jameis Winston has had to work with in his time. It's also a more mature Jameis Winston, a guy who is comfortable in his own skin. The fact that the Giants were able to get him for $8 million at the base over 2 years and $16 million if he hits all of his incentives, that is, he might not make the team type of money to give somebody to come in who could either be the backup to another veteran that you bring in, be a mentor to a rookie that you bring in, or be the starter if you decide that you don't want to go with a guy to start immediately as a rookie, or bring in a developmental guy. Like if you bring in a developmental guy, Jameis Winston is your dude, and you've got him as a starter for 2 years on $8 million, 16 potentially. That allows you to do a lot of maneuvering to build the team to its highest level before you drop whoever the eventual long-term starter is. I think it's a great opportunity for Winston to kind of get his mojo rolling again, and maybe at 31 years old, which we know is still the prime of a quarterback's career, have a second act where he gets an opportunity to be a starting quarterback. If not for the Giants, for somebody that will be looking to take advantage of his skill set, if he can get that one little thing that he has as kind of like his boo-hoo under control.
As for fantasy, we love Winston because we know he's going to go out there and put the football in the air and give his receivers opportunities. It is going to come with interceptions. We know that, but he can put up touchdowns too. And we saw last year when he got the opportunity to start for Cleveland. I mean, you look at some of the games and the pass attempts, 41, 46, 46, 58, 41. So that part we love. Again, it remains to be seen if he is going to start. We'll see what the Giants do in the draft. I know we'll talk about that a little bit later on during the show. You know, and I saw people say, oh, that's Malik Nabers to the moon. I mean, look, Malik Nabers was already going to the moon anyway. So, like last year, he was definitely someone that I was very high on. I know Kendall was very high on. I took him as early as the second round. I couldn't believe in my home league draft, which is full of Giants, he somehow fell to the late fourth round. I could not believe it, and obviously I took him at that point. But we saw last year it didn't matter who the quarterback was because they had many issues at the quarterback position, and all we saw was Malik Nabers go out there and put up insane numbers, 109 receptions on 170 targets. And I remember last year there was like a split, right? People were like, well, yes, Nabers is really talented, but look at the quarterback situation. But when you looked at that receiving core, that was why I was optimistic. I was like, he's going to get at least 150 targets. You drafted him early. He's talented. He's going to get at least 150 targets. And even if it's not the best quarterback play, he's going to be able to turn that into yards, receptions. Maybe the touchdowns wouldn't be there. And he had 7 touchdowns in 15 games. But it was a great season for Nabers. And we're already seeing him go early. So I guess the question would be, at wide receiver, where would you take him? Would you take Jamar Chase over him, correct?
Yes.
Justin Jefferson.
But it's Nabers to the moon.
Right. I mean,
it really is. And I think the difference with if Jameis Winston is the quarterback, I'll just speak and let's just assume that he's the quarterback to start the season, right? The difference with Jameis Winston and you got with any of those guys is that Jameis Winston's going to put the ball on Malik Nabers in a position where he can do something with it after the catch. A lot of the stuff that Malik Nabers got last year was static catches. It was him standing still, getting a hitch route, getting a deep out route where he has to just run out of bounds. There weren't a lot of opportunities for him to catch the ball and then do something with the ball after the catch. If you notice, towards the end of the year, when they put Drew Lock in, who had a little bit liver arm, and then he started playing like he didn't care what the outcome would be, you started to see Malik Nabers be able to do more after the catch. And I think that if you put him in a situation where he's now going to get more passes, I expect him to get less targets this year and have better production. And I think that's going to be the case regardless of who the quarterback ends up being. Whoever it is, if it's Jameis, if it's Cam Ward, if it's Shadur Sanders, if it's Aaron Rodgers, they're going to get the ball to him in positions where he can do something with it after the catch.
Yeah, and it's backed up 11 yards per reception last year, right? It was a lot. How many games we were watching? It was like 4-yard catch, 6-yard catch. Now in PPR leagues, we were loving it, right? Because we want those receptions, but I think you do make a good point that you could see the bigger plays. Winston will be able to get him the ball downfield.
I'm taking him over Justin Jefferson, by the way.
You are? Well, okay.
Yep.
That's
I'm
pretty.
slotting him in right now as wide receiver 2.
Receiver 2. Okay.
Behind Chase.
Wow, that's pretty bold. I mean, it's not outlandish. I mean, you do have, you have Jefferson there, you have CeeDee Lamb, Puka Nacua, Amon-Ra St. Brown. So it's not crazy. We're seeing him go late first round right now. He's generally like the 5th, 6th receiver off the board. I think there was even maybe as of a few weeks ago, you were seeing him and Brian Thomas kind of in the same range. And I know that's something that we talked about, but you're clearly taking Malik Nabers over Brian Thomas, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think that Malik Nabers is better than Brian Thomas. I mean, I think that what we saw out of Malik Nabers last year was not Malik Nabers. It was a guy in an offense that didn't allow us to see his true gifts, or at least all of them. And I think if you get a full year of him being kind of unlocked by better quarterback play, you're going to see the yards after the catch, the broken tackles. You're going to see all of those things improve for him. And I think he'll catch the ball better. I think he had a little of the dropsies this year. Maybe it was a part of a concentration issue, maybe not being as happy. I think you'll see that as he matures more. He's super young. He matures more. I think you'll see that improve, which is going to, improve his production.
Yeah, and the other thing is, you did mention if you do think targets come down a little bit, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be worse, because the touchdowns were something that we didn't see. For a guy that had 109 receptions, he had 7 touchdowns. That was obviously a product of the offense, but he had 3 touchdowns the first 3 games and then 4 in the last 3. So there should be the ability to get double-digit touchdowns for him this year as well.
Yeah, and if you're thinking about it, that piece of the schedule in the middle, there was all kinds of ridiculousness going on with that team. Changing of quarterbacks, offensive linemen getting hurt. If you think about it, the last 4 games of the season is when they kind of settled in and decided we were going to move Illuminor to left tackle, insert Evan Neal back to the right side, gave it a little bit more continuity on that offensive line. They were able to make some things happen, much to the chagrin of Giants fans who wanted them to lose every single game so they could get the number 1 pick. But you could see how this would happen, or how this is going to go, if they have a fully healthy offensive line and they get more consistent quarterback play. And the one thing we know from Jameis Winston, he's not afraid to turn it loose. So if you're going, he's letting it go. And he does not throw interceptions on deep passes. His interceptions come on the short, like, first level passes where he's trying to hit a quick hitch or a quick crosser. Those are the places where he gets in trouble, because he's not scanning the field fully, or maybe the wide receiver does something that he's not thinking that the wide receiver was going to do, and he trusts that receiver, and the receiver does something goofy and there's an interception, right? Like, he throws most of his interceptions at the first level. Deep, he's extremely accurate. The ball doesn't stay in the air very long, and it usually hits the receiver in stride.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. If Winston is the starting quarterback for the Giants, we'll see what they do in the draft, or even if they bring in a veteran quarterback, someone else, which Aaron Rodgers, you don't see that happening, right? He was at the Steelers facility on Friday. I know everyone's sick of Aaron Rodgers. We just want to see him make a decision already. But, I mean, what's going on? Where do you think Aaron Rodgers eventually lands? Because I think people just want him to make a decision already. And we know Aaron Rodgers, he's probably loving this right now.
Oh, no, he absolutely loves it. But I don't understand what better situation he's going to find than Pittsburgh. Like, if it wasn't about the money, I think the Giants probably put the biggest bag out there for him, right? So if it's not about the money, and that's why you didn't sign with the Giants, were you trying to hold out with these other teams to get more money? I'm not sure. But if you're just talking about the best possible place to go and make sure that you could keep the money train going for the next few years, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like Russell Wilson did not look impressive with Pittsburgh, and people are still out here clamoring for Russell Wilson to be their starter. So if you add a guy like Aaron Rodgers in, who I don't think is where he used to be. You guys know, in the Sunday show during the season, I was hardcore banging on Aaron Rodgers, and rightfully so. He's not the same guy, but he's still not bad, right? He's not the same guy. He's not bad. He's going to be a passing upgrade from what the Steelers had last year. And now when you add a DK Metcalf to the mix, you got a Metcalf and a Pickens. That's going to be an interesting wide receiver room. But with an Aaron Rodgers, like, I just don't understand what better job he thinks he's getting out here.
Well, is it he's thinking Minnesota, but that's not going to happen?
It could be. But again, if you're thinking Minnesota, then you have to come down off of a number, because Minnesota doesn't need you. They have a guy already that they feel good about, that they probably would love to see sit down and wait for another year and get fully back from an injury, but they're more than willing to put him out there. And so you've got to come down off whatever number you would have wanted from Minnesota, but that clearly wasn't what he was thinking. And even then, I still might go Pittsburgh. Like, I just think that the what Pittsburgh could offer as a defense to get him back the ball, they're going to be dedicated to running the ball. I think it's a much more difficult division in my opinion, because you have Baltimore, you have Cincinnati there. The Browns, even though they're the Browns, they're still not an easy out. We saw that last year when Jameis beat them. But I think that's the best opportunity to have the most success for him.
Yeah, when you look at Rodgers, I think if you ask most people, hey, what were Aaron Rodgers' stats last year with the Jets? I think everyone would get it wrong. And I know stats can be misleading, but obviously for fantasy, it's important for us. He had 28 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. So that's not bad. Obviously, the start to the season wasn't good. But do you think he can be, I don't want to say fantasy relevant, because at best he would be a low-end QB2, but in Pittsburgh, you think he could put up similar type of numbers?
Yeah, I still think he's capable of throwing for 30 touchdowns. Like, I still think he's capable of putting up legitimate starter numbers. I just don't think he's capable of putting up Aaron Rodgers numbers.
Yeah, I think everyone agrees to that.
I think that's the difference. If you keep saying, hey, we're going to get Aaron Rodgers in here to be Aaron Rodgers, then you've missed that boat by 5 or 6 years. If you think you can get somebody to come in there and give you legitimate quarterback play, if healthy and if he's really locked in, then yeah, I think that's possible. 30 touchdowns, anywhere between 8 to 12 interceptions. I could see Aaron Rodgers having one of those years. And if he has that type of year with 3,500 to 4,000 yards, he's going to get another bag from somewhere, if not from Pittsburgh, which is why I don't understand why he wouldn't just lock this in right now and get over with the charade.
As we expected, the Bengals did sign Ja'Marr Chase. Of course, they waited so long that they had to pay more money, 4 years, $161 million, and T. Higgins. A lot of people thought he might be gone, going to a different team, but Higgins stays 4 years, $115 million. So the Bengals keep their 2 wide receivers with Joe Burrow. A lot of questions on the defensive side of the football, though, for them. But that's great for fantasy. We saw it last year. They were a really bad defense. And what did it mean? They were giving up a lot of points. The offense had to pass and keep up with their opponents. And it led to great numbers for both receivers. I mean, Ja'Marr Chase was, depending on when you drafted last year, too, there was the potential holdout. So I did see him go late first round in some drafts. So if that happened, you obviously got a phenomenal bargain, considering he had 127 receptions, 1,708 yards, and 17 touchdowns. But this year, it looks like he's going to be number 1 overall in most drafts. Some people might go running back. But if you had the number 1 pick, Gene, would you take Ja'Marr Chase?
I would say yes, but Saquon's right there. And if he's doing what he did last year, which I 100% expect him to do again, that's hard to pass up as well. I wouldn't be mad. Put it like this. If I had the number 1 pick and someone said, hey, you just have to take Ja'Marr Chase, I'd be like, all right. I wouldn't lose any sleep over it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think I would take him. I mean, I play in a lot of PPR leagues, and when you look at Chase, just the floor is so high. Like, the worst week for Ja'Marr Chase is like 5 for 60, and that's still double-digit points in a PPR. And we know the boom weeks are just insane. I mean, it could be 120 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, going back to last year, if you look, his worst game was actually in week 2 against Kansas City, 4 catches for 35 yards. And I just don't think we'll see many games like that. You're getting double-digit targets almost every single week. Look, with Barkley, I think you're going to hear a lot of people say, well, you usually don't see a running back have that season 2 years in a row. And you can't just use that as the argument, because sometimes it's outliers. Barkley is still young at 28. He is coming off a massive workload. In the regular season, 345 carries, 33 receptions. And then, of course, the playoffs as well. We did see him banged up late, but it's the perfect offense, perfect fit for him. It was the perfect marriage. So I think that's what people are going to say. Well, he had such a big workload. In the history of football, we've seen that sometimes. It's not the same the next year. He had 5.8 yards per carry, best of his career. I think that's the worry for some, is like, can he do that again? Basically, can he stay healthy again? And I think that's why some people might go, well, I can't take him 1. But it's hard to play like that, though, at the same time. Just because it's happened a few times does not mean that it can happen with this player. And the way Barkley's built, too, he seems like he could be able to withstand that.
Yeah, his injuries have not been like, oh, well, I'm going to be out for a while with this little small injury. That they have been catastrophic injuries. Other than that, he's pretty much answered the bell outside of like a game here or a game there. So I think that's the difference. Also, I would push back at those people and go, that didn't stop you guys from drafting Christian McCaffrey #1 overall for several years.
Not me. Well,
several years.
No, you're correct. In this past year, I wanted no part of McCaffrey. None. Like, I couldn't believe how people, even during the preseason, were just like, oh, yeah, it's not a big deal. The 49ers are playing it safe. Like, and again,
like, nah.
I got stuff wrong last year. We all do. But that was one on this show that I was adamant. I'm like, I am not taking McCaffrey 1, and I didn't have him anywhere. And you could say, well, it was bad luck. The 49ers lied to us. But McCaffrey, if you go back and look at his history, when he has those big years of a lot of touches, he doesn't play much the next year.
Exactly. I think this is an interesting thing, though, the contracts with Chase and with Higgins, because both of those guys getting paid at the exact same time can't be good for your salary cap, right? I don't care how you structured it. It can't be good to pay both of those dudes at the same time when you could have staggered it and had one guy, locked up earlier and another guy now getting paid right now. Also, I don't want to hear anything about, oh, well, you got to get Joe Burrow an offensive line and you got to get Joe Burrow a defense and Joe Burrow. Like, nope. What they did was said, we as an offense should be able to win games. So when they lose games, don't put it on anybody else. This team has been built through the offense. They have played the gross national product of a small third world country in order to have these three guys locked up in their organization. So it's the responsibility of those three guys and the people around them on offense to get it done. I don't want to hear any of the excuses that they be trying to put out there for Joe Burrow, because this is what they've asked for. This is what they got now. And so if you're going to pay T. Higgins wide receiver 1 money to be wide receiver 2 that never plays a full season, then guess what? You're going to be hurting on offense sometimes. I don't want to hear the excuses. To me, this means no excuses from the Bengals. It also means everybody on offense, like, jack them up another notch in fantasy, because they're going to have to just throw the ball all over the place in order to win games.
Yeah, look, and they're going to put up points. We saw it last year. The question is, can they stop the opponent? From a NFL perspective, they still have many issues on the defensive side of the football. You mentioned Higgins missing games, and he has. He's played 12 games each of the last 2 years, did play 16 games in 2 of his first 3. We've seen Higgins be able to be a wide receiver 1, even with Chase on the field. So would you draft him as, 12th receiver off the board? Do you think that's the appropriate price for T. Higgins this year?
I think he gets elevated because they have to win with him. Like, I think that's where it is. Like, he's a quasi wide receiver 1 just because you have to win with him, right? Like, who else is the ball going to? It's going to go to Chase. It's going to go to Higgins. They're going to have to throw the ball a lot because they're going to be behind in games. We've seen that last year. Their best defensive player doesn't want to be there anymore. They're trying to find a way to get him off the books and trade him for something. Who knows if it's going to happen, because they want a king's ransom for him. But that defense wasn't good with him. So it's not going to be good without him. They didn't just all of a sudden go out and grab some more players. They're going to try to run it back with that goofy defense and those phenomenal pieces on offense. And that is gold to anybody who plays fantasy.
Yeah, it might not be gold for Bengals fans with that defense, but for fantasy purposes, and that's what we're here for. Obviously, we love those pieces. You're going to have to pay a high price, though, to get Chase, to get Higgins, and even Burrow. Now, Burrow doesn't give you that rushing element like some of the other elite quarterbacks, but last year in points per game in leagues for 6 points for a passing touchdown. Now, obviously, the pocket passers get elevated in 6 points for a passing touchdown. The rushing quarterbacks are a little bit more advantageous in leagues with 4 points for a passing touchdown. There are some that use 6 points. I know the NFFC does. Some of the other high stakes use 4 points for a passing touchdown. But in leagues last year with 6 points for a passing touchdown, Burrow was second in points per game. Only Lamar Jackson was better. So Burrow was better than Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, in that format, Jalen Hurts. where are you looking to draft Burrow? I'm assuming you're going to take Lamar Jackson over him, Jaden Daniels, right?
I'm definitely. Well, I mean, you guys know about me and Lamar Jackson. Like he's my guy all the time. I'd probably be coin flip between him and Jaden Daniels, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Like I think because of the way they're going to have to win games, it's going to be in his hands. And not for nothing, he does pick up like sneaky amounts of first downs with rushing, so he'll end the game with a sneaky 35 yards, and maybe even like that one game where he took it all the way to the house. I think it was against the Giants where he went 70 yards or something crazy and got a touchdown. He put up ridiculous numbers that day. Like you could have him slide in there with a sneaky 35, 40 yards rushing, which is just, icing on the cake if you're somebody looking for those extra yards. I think he has 5,000 yards, 35 plus touchdowns written all over him, because how else are they going to win?
Yeah, basically last year, 8 of the last 9 games, he had at least 3 touchdown passes in those games. He came close to 5,000 yards last year, 4,918, 43 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. And it's insane, the numbers he put up. And he was like the 8th quarterback off the board last year. I think people were a little concerned about him coming off that wrist injury, and he showed no problems. And again,
no problem.
Like you said, but it's just, you look at it, and when you see these seasons, you're like, well, they can't do it again. But 652 pass attempts last year for Burrow, and I don't see it changing because I don't think they can overhaul this defense in a way to make them competitive on the defensive side. It just looks like a similar situation to last year. So, yeah, Burrow, he's going to be like, I probably 4th, 5th quarterback off the board. Maybe he does go higher. So maybe some people have the sentiment you have. Maybe you see him go over a Jalen Hurts, possibly.
Yeah, I think people will just default to the normal names without really even looking at the statistics or the potential for what they might be able to do. They'll just default to the names and go, okay, Lamar, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. They might still be looking at Patrick Mahomes that way, which I think would be a mistake because we don't know what they're going to look like going forward. But I think if you're looking at at what they can produce, what their ceiling looks like, his ceiling looks ridiculous. Like it looks like 50 touchdowns and 5,000 yards. Like I always try to default to like 35 to 40 for a great season because it is the NFL and people do play a little bit of defense. But with the way in which they have to win games, I don't see it all of a sudden being, somebody running for 15 rushing touchdowns on the team. So how else are they going to score? They're going to throw it in. And their offense isn't just predicated on bombs away down the field. He gets the ball in the hands of Chase and of Higgins, and he allows those guys to do work after the catch. Part of the reason why I like Shadur Sanders and why there's been a lot of comps between Shadur Sanders and what he does is because they get the ball in the hands of the receivers and allow the receivers to do work. And so with that, you can see him anytime he's on the 30 to 20 yards going in, a nice slant pattern to Chase might be a touchdown. An in route to Higgins might end up as a touchdown. And so like, that's where you get those numbers just kind of get run up amazingly on that offense, and why he's going to be fantasy relevant for whomever takes him. And you might get him at a bargain because, again, people may just forget about it. And then all of a sudden you're in like round 6 and 7 and people still haven't, I don't know. It just all depends on how these things shake out.
Yeah, I think it also depends on, some leagues we see people wait on quarterbacks. I think you're starting to see people now buy in to taking the quarterback early because they see what Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, what those guys can do. But on the flip side, you also have these bargain quarterbacks. Now, you have to hit on the right one, right? Last year was Baker Mayfield. If you took him later, took him off the waiver wire, that worked out well. Bo Nix, if you took him late or picked him up off the waiver wire with the way he finished the year. So you can find these quarterbacks late, but at the same time, you pretty much know those top quarterbacks, especially with their ability to run, you know what you're getting. Now, it does come at a cost because you're often looking at, rounds 3, 4, or 5, depending on the draft. So typically I'm a guy that waits on the quarterback, but I could see paying up for one of these. It gives you peace of mind too. All right, this is my quarterback every single week, and you don't even need to worry about a backup until the last few rounds. Now, if I'm in a draft with 16 rounds, I'm not taking a backup quarterback because your bench is 5 to 6 guys, and with bye weeks and injuries, I don't think you can carry 2. But I play in a lot of leagues with 20 roster spots, so in that format, I will take a second quarterback. But if I'm drafting an elite one, a Josh Allen, a Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, Burrow, to me, it makes no sense to take a backup quarterback around 10, 11, 12. I'll just take someone late in the last few rounds.
Yeah, it's all about roster construction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how you want to put your roster together. If you sat here and told me, hey, listen, I'm just not taking a quarterback early because I don't want to waste a premium spot and miss out on a wide receiver or a running back who could really, elevate my team. I think I can get someone to be within 5 to 6 points on average of what that starting quarterback can be. I can find that guy in the later rounds. Cool. I don't want to have that on my heart. I don't want to have that on my conscience. I want to be able to set it and forget it. If you remember that infomercial from years ago, I want to be able to just go, okay, it's Lamar Jackson this week, and we're not worried about it.
Lock him in.
Yeah, like I don't ever have to worry about my quarterback position because I'm getting a premium quarterback, and because people are so like. It used to be I used to be able to get these quarterbacks like in the 8th and 9th round, right? Back when people weren't really on dual threats. I got Cam Newton super late every year.
Yeah.
I used to get Lamar Jackson late early on.
People have gotten
until
smart.
People came around, right?
Because of fantasy life, people got smart.
Yeah, it's our fault. It's our fault. But I still can get them at a bargain because people are still going to reach for running backs. Like, people are already taking Ashton Jeanty in the top 2 rounds of a draft. We had a mock draft over at Fantasy Life for one of the pieces that one of our colleagues were doing. And someone took Ashton Jeanty in the 2nd round. And I was like, you took a guy who plays running back and you don't know what team he's going to be on, what their condition is. And you just said, nope, 2nd rounder. Well, guess what? That's another spot that drops down a quarterback. So now when I come back in the 4th round and get a Lamar Jackson because nobody got him before that, they were just reaching for wide receivers and running backs, I still look at that as a value pick. So for me, it's what's this league that I'm in? And this is what most fantasy managers should be trying to do. Figure out your league, figure out what people hang their hat on, and try to work within the margins to get the guys that they're overlooking because they might be overvaluing people that they shouldn't be overvaluing.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, look, if you got Lamar Jackson in round 4 last year, it was a bargain. I mean, he was the best quarterback in fantasy by a considerable margin. So Jaden Daniels was a value too because he was going round 8, round 9, but Lamar still outproduced him more than almost 6 points per game in leagues that were 6 points for a passing touchdown. It is Fantasy Life here on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. Adam Ronis and Gene Clemons here until 3 p.m. Eastern on a Sunday afternoon. Talking NFL. Cooper Kupp goes to Seattle. And Kupp got off to a good start last year, but faded down the stretch to the point where he was barely getting targets, couldn't get open. Still has that name for fantasy, but I will say this. I do not want any part of Cooper Kupp this year. The Rams, who know him best, they didn't even want him back at all. I mean, they just basically didn't consider him, and the injuries have definitely limited him. He couldn't get open as often. Obviously, Sam Darnold now quarterback there in Seattle. Metcalf's gone. Lockett's gone. You have Jackson Smith and Jigba there, but I don't have confidence in Cooper Kupp for fantasy for this upcoming year. You agree, disagree?
Yeah, clearly I agree. 2 years ago, I was telling people to get off the Cooper Kupp train. I told people then, like, hey, this guy is, a guy who's never been what you believe he is. It's always kind of been fool's gold with Cooper Kupp. He's only had 1 year where he finished wide receiver 1. He's only had 2 seasons where he finished better than top 5 He's only had 2 seasons where he finished better than top 10. He's only got 1 year where he actually played 17 or a full season, worth of football. I said that 2 years ago, and people were like, "You're crazy." What has happened since then? Nothing, right? Like this happens. And by the way, the Rams are uniquely qualified because they had a guy by the name of Robert Woods who was Cooper Kupp before Cooper Kupp. He was out there. He was routing people up. He was the one teaching Cooper Kupp how to better maneuver and get open. And Cooper Kupp took his job, and then they got rid of Robert Woods. So guess what happened? Kupp came in, then Puka Nacua comes in, and Puka Nacua is now the new Cooper Kupp. It's time for Cooper Kupp to move on. What I think is really interesting is Seattle giving him more money than I thought he would get on the free agency market to come up there and do what? With who? Like, that's not even how Sam Darnold has been able to be successful in Minnesota. You've got to duplicate the type of receivers that Sam Darnold had success with in Minnesota if you want him to try to have success in Seattle. It's not going to be with a 3 yards in the cloud of dust, 30-plus-year-old wide receiver that can't stay healthy. I'm sorry. To me, it's one of those moves that you make as a player because you want to be closer to home. It's your last opportunity to cash out, but I don't see how this is a great marriage for Cooper Kupp or for the Seattle team, and I definitely don't think it helps Sam Darnold out.
Yeah, I completely agree. I really didn't want him last year, and I was in a draft with a partner, and he kind of convinced me. I said, okay, fine. And then the season started, and he had a couple of big games. I think the first game of the year last year, 21 targets, 14 catches, 110 yards and a touchdown. And, partner looks at me and goes, see, told him. I'm like, all right, fine. And then, it got good. And then, of course, after week 2, he was injured, missed about a month, came back. And then down the stretch, it was just brutal. I mean, you look at the last few games, 3 targets, 3, 1 against Minnesota. The Philly game in the postseason was like the best game he had late in the year, and it was only 5 for 61 on 7 targets. But the Rams, you got to listen to some teams, like you illustrated. The Rams know what they're doing, and they basically said, nope, we don't want Cooper Kupp. So I don't want him either in fantasy. Sam Darnold, you touched upon it a little bit. He's coming off an amazing season, but I think we all believe that was the system. It was O'Connell. It was set up perfectly for him. But we did see in the 2 biggest games of the season, Darnold did not come through at all. And now going to Seattle, is there any hope for Darnold in fantasy in 2025?
I don't see the fantasy hope for Darnold. Can he be just a good quarterback? Sure. He can be a good quarterback. They've invested in him like they believe he can be a good quarterback. So yeah, like that can be him. But do I think he's going to have any fantasy relevance? Nah. I just don't see that happening. He doesn't have the explosive elements around him in order to have that level of fantasy relevance to jump guys that we know are going to be able to produce.
Justin Fields, now the quarterback for the New York Jets. And Fields is polarizing from NFL perspective, fantasy perspective. But I will tell you this. If Fields is a starting quarterback, I usually want him on my fantasy team because of his ability to run. We've just seen it. Yes, there are times he doesn't look good as a passer. He's going to be inaccurate, but we know he's going to run. And when you have that floor for a running quarterback, you're going to put up borderline QB1 numbers. It's not going to be pretty sometimes. You might not want to watch some of the games, but I think Fields is still like a borderline QB1 because of his ability to run. What are your thoughts on Fields for the upcoming season?
I mean, I agree. I think Fields is a guy who gets wrongly labeled because people aren't willing to admit that there's more than one way to play the quarterback position. Everybody has to play it the way that, the way that Dan Marino played it in order for people to feel comfortable, right? Like they've come up with new terms in order to make it seem as if you're playing the game wrong if you play it a different way. But I look at this from from Justin Fields. Like, yeah, he's going to maybe be a little bit inaccurate, but in his little bit of time last year, he completed 65% of his passes. Are you going to take that? Yeah. He's going to turn the ball over a little bit, but in his 6 games that he had to start last year, he had 1 interception, right? Like, when you add all of those things in and not turning the ball over, being more accurate, allowing people to get the ball in their hands, and then you add in the rushing upside. That's why people who are heavy deep into fantasy, they love to wait out a Justin Fields. That's the one that you see a lot of people wait out. If you don't want to take a quarterback early, you'll see them wait out a Justin Fields and get him later in the rounds, because people are only thinking about him as a passer and not necessarily thinking about him as a rusher. And then you come in round 13 and snatch him up because he's just been sitting around hanging out. And then people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he got Justin Fields. It's like, yeah, dummy, he's been sitting there the entire time.
Yeah, I think there will be people like you and me, though, in a draft who will not wait that long and grab him. If he's going to start, and again, that floor, what he gives you, and I'm looking, I think our consensus rankings have him 13th at quarterback, which probably is the right spot. Like, if you want to pair him with another quarterback, I'm okay with that. The only thing with that is if you have 2 similar quarterbacks, that decision every week, you're going to get it wrong sometimes, because you'll have the favorable matchup for Fields and maybe the other quarterback goes off. Like, in that same range, you got Jordan Love, Caleb Williams, Jared Goff. So if you take like 2 of those guys, that's the only issue. It goes back to the conversation we previously had, where if you have that one quarterback, set it and forget it, you don't have to deal with that, because there are going to be weeks you get it wrong and it's going to eat at you. You're like, wow, I left a quarterback on the bench with 27 points. My guy had 14. So that's the only other issue. The other thing, because I saw some talk like, oh, this is bad for Garrett Wilson. Do people forget DJ Moore had like his best season with Justin Fields?
Yeah, I don't understand what people are thinking. They always say, oh, well, these wide receivers won't. And I'm like, what do you think it takes for the wide receivers to be successful? Like, it doesn't take them having an Aaron Rodgers to be successful. DJ Moore had his best season under Fields. And if you remember at the beginning of the year, and I know our one of our producers, Matthew Swain, will remember this from Fantasy Life, that first 4 games, they were actively not targeting Moore, and he still went out there and had a career year. So I'm not convinced that he can't still be good.
Adam Ronis, Gene Clemons here for one more hour, taking you until 3 p.m. Eastern here on a Sunday afternoon, recapping a lot of the big moves in free agency in the NFL and some of the trades. And coming up in a little bit, we'll also take a look at the latest mock draft from Gene Clemons, get his thoughts on how things can go. But let's take a look now at some of the other recent moves in Najee Harris going to the Chargers. So Najee Harris has been a guy that stays on the field, right? He's never missed a game in his NFL career. Has had to split a little bit the last couple years with Jaylen Warren. Mediocre numbers, right? 1,000 yards, not a big deal now with the NFL season, 17 games. Yards per carry only 3.9. You could make it a case that it's partly the Pittsburgh offense and the offensive line. We saw what the Chargers did last year for running backs. J.K. Dobbins, really good year. Gus Edwards, solid at times. What are your thoughts here on Najee Harris now? Is he a guy that maybe people are going to be like, he's not explosive, he's not going to put up big numbers? Do you think this is a really good fit for him here with the Chargers and the way that they run their offense?
I think it's a perfect fit. I think he could not have found a better home. I talked about it on a round table that we did for Fantasy Life with Kendall and a few other people, but this is, to me, was a free agent signing that was kind of etched into heaven. The problem that Najee Harris had coming out of college is that everybody expected him to be Derrick Henry, when nobody thought Derrick Henry would be Derrick Henry. I was one of the only people who thought that Derrick Henry should have been a first-round draft pick when he came out. When you look at what he does, it's not flashy, it's not special, but it's consistent. And if you know anything about a Harbaugh, Harbaugh just wants you to be consistently who you are. And Najee Harris can go there now, not having to live in the, kind of in the shadow of what his draft spot said he was supposed to be and what the expectations were of him coming out of college. He can just be a guy who goes in and does his job. Is he going to be better than Gus Edwards? Absolutely. Like, come on. So he's going to be able to jump into that role that Gus Edwards was holding. And if they give him the job, the full-time job, he's probably going to get you close to double-digit touchdowns this year. He's likely going to go over 1,000 yards again. That's not a bad dude to have in fantasy. Is it going to be sexy? Is it going to be home runs hit? Nope. But is it going to be consistent? Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, especially we touched upon roster construction. Now, in the past, what I like to do is get one of those, bell cow running backs early and then go kind of heavy receiver, maybe mix in a tight end or quarterback. And I'm usually trying to find my RB2. I'm going to take a lot of shots. Now, if not, Harris is going to be undervalued and you're able to get him, I don't know, 7th, 8th round, and that's the RB2 for that blueprint that I just gave. Like, I'm fine with that because, like you said, I don't need a home run pick. I need a guy that's going to be consistent, especially if I'm able to get, whether it's a Barkley early, a Bijan, a Gibbs, whoever it is, and then load up with receivers. Now, that didn't work last year because so many of those wide receivers got hurt, unless you were fortunate and got the guys that didn't. But that's a solid RB2 in an offense that fits him really well. Like, I didn't think I would be looking at Najee Harris this year, but then seeing the landing spot, it's got me a little excited for Najee Harris for this year.
Yeah, you gotta keep an eye on him during a draft. Like, I'm not reaching for him, obviously, but you gotta keep an eye on him because if he's around, like you said, if he's around in that time, who are you getting that's going to command as many touches as he's going to command in that offense? By the way, that is surrounded by a bunch of first-round draft pick offensive linemen.
Exactly.
Like, that's the key. They've invested in the line. The coordinator, the head coach, they're all on the same page. This is San Francisco all over again, and they've just brought the job over here to LA. So I think it's a perfect place for Najee. I'm not reaching for him, but if he's there, I'm definitely scooping him up.
Davante Adams goes to the Rams. Now, last year, I was not interested in Adams early in draft season. I just thought it was not going to be a great fit with Vegas and the quarterback situation. There was a lot of talk that he could be traded to the Jets, and eventually he did. And he went to the Jets. It was a slow start, but boy, that finish to the season. Like, if you drafted Adams and were able to hold on and get through that rough patch, Adams was a difference maker down the stretch. And a lot of it had to do with Aaron Rodgers just saying, hey, that's my guy. Let me get him the football. But he can still get open. I mean, you look at the underlying metrics, they were better than Cooper Kupp. We know Puka Nacua is there. But is this a good spot here for Adams going to the Rams? Does he interest you in fantasy this year?
Veteran quarterback, not going to be the focal point of the offense. They've got a good running game. They've got a wide receiver number 1. He can kind of work within that wide receiver 2 function for them and be essentially what Cooper Kupp couldn't be this year, right? And if we know that Stafford's going to throw the ball, right? We know he's going to throw the ball. We think that Adams still has the juice left in order to be able to get open, get the ball, and then do something with it after the catch. I think you'll see him still be a force in the red zone. He just understands how to work, and get into those areas to get the ball. He's got great hands. He's always had great hands. It'll be interesting to see how much he's targeted, but he's worth keeping an eye on. Again, another one of those guys where I'm not like going out of my way to put a draft strategy together to get him on the team. But if it falls just right, and I need a guy who I believe is going to get targeted, I do think that's going to be Adams, because who else are they going to throw the ball to? Is one of those other guys that they have on the Rams that they've been kind of grooming over the years. Are they ready to take that next step up? Or is there a reason why they went out and got Davante Adams? is because they think that those guys aren't ready and he's going to be able to come in. It's not the Tutu Atwell show yet, right? And so I think a bigger body guy who knows how to move is going to be just what the doctor ordered in LA.
When you look at receivers and their age, so Adams just turned 32 in December. We've seen sometimes these receivers, early 30s, like it just falls off a cliff. Like there's not a gradual decline. Like, how do you handle those guys? Do you need to see it first? Like with the Adams, do you think that he'll be fine for 1 more year, 2 more years? Is there anything that you look at to say, yeah, you know what, I want to get off a year early? Because we've seen it in the past. Sometimes you don't see any signs. It just is a steep decline.
So the one thing that I look for in the receiver is how they make their money. Because Cooper Kupp was never a burn him down the field type of guy, I thought he would have a longer fall off. But the injuries got in the way, right? The injuries are what really doomed him. Davante Adams hasn't really had a bunch of those types of injuries that would do him in, and he's not a guy who just burns down the field. He's a guy who knows how to run routes. He's very technical. He understands how to get in and out of breaks. So for me, those guys tend to get a bit longer leash on their quote unquote prime than those guys who are really, really looking for the deep shot in order to get them over. Especially bigger body receivers tend to last a little bit longer because they can rely on their body and using their body to kind of be that extra shield in between them and the defender.
Chris Godwin returns to Tampa Bay. I think most people wanted to see this best landing spot. He's familiar with the offense and Baker Mayfield. And boy, Godwin was on his way to a insane season last year. I had him in a few leagues, and it was a brutal injury because you saw what he was doing. 62 targets in 7 games, 50 receptions, 576 yards, 5 touchdowns. His career high was 9. So he was well on his way to a career season. And, you know, he's had some really good seasons in his career as far as yards and receptions. So I'm glad to see Godwin back here with Tampa. I think it's a really good fit. You know, like 2 years ago, Godwin was going ahead of Evans. Evans had the better year. Last year, it was flipped. And I think in the end, Godwin would have had a better year than Evans had he finished the year. I think we were kind of on that pace. But where do you see Godwin in this season? Would you take him ahead of Mike Evans? Do you like both of them? It obviously comes down to the health, but you got to think Tampa believes that he's going to be fine and ready to start the year with them bringing him back because he did get interest from other teams.
Yeah, I think I love Godwin. I was hurt when he got injured. I had him on quite a few teams. I'm a Buccaneers fan, so obviously it wasn't the best day when he got injured, especially when you saw the injury and you saw his response to the injury. Time to go back to work again. You know, yeah. But what that tells me is he's used to getting injured. And I get worried with wide receivers who are used to getting injured. Because once the injury train starts to hit you, it just keeps pulling back up to the station. And he's had a few of those injuries that are going to start like yielding diminishing returns. And I don't know if this is the one, right? Like that's the thing. I'm not sure that this is the one that he gets back to full strength. The last time he had a season-ending injury, it was a touch and go next season for him when he came back. It wasn't just right back to business. That was the year Evans, I think, had a better season than him. It wasn't until last year where you saw him really start to look like himself again. Can he do that again? Can he get back to that level by the start of next year? Or are we looking at somebody that might be a better stash and hope that by mid-year he's back up to that level? I don't know if you can afford to take him where you're going to have to take him and then stash him away for, half the season until he's back right, if he's back right. So for me, I'm looking at it with a little bit of trepidation. I don't know if I'm running out to get him. If I'm being honest, if I was the GM, I don't know if I spend the money necessary to bring him back. I know that he came back on a discount from all reports, but I feel like if he's not who he's been, we've seen that they found a way to get by not having him. And I think they could do that again. But with him back, I'd really need to see what he's going to look like. I'm going to be interested in watching how summer camp unfolds and then into the preseason, what we're seeing from him. If he feels like he's good, if it feels like he's good to go, then I'll probably slate him in where I had him last year and take my chances.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask you, and you kind of mentioned sometimes when these players coming off injuries, you want to see how the offseason goes, training camp. But what I also, when I hear you say that, that tells me you're like Jaylen McMillan late. Now, McMillan was a guy that I drafted in a lot of leagues last year. I wrote about it. I remember for the Fantasy Life newsletter, I'm like, say, hey, this is a guy you want to draft, and it might take time. You're probably going to need an Evans or Godwin injury. And even when it happened, they both went down. It wasn't great at first, but my goodness, to finish the year. And that's one of those things where I did cut McMillan off a lot of rosters. And I don't regret it because if you look, you take those guys late, but you have to see how the season goes. And if you look at those first few games, it wasn't happening. And there's only so long, depending on your roster depth, that you can hold on to those guys because the buys start week 4, week 5. And you see a guy that's barely involved in the offense. And you look at the start to the season, and it also happens with rookies too. Not all of these rookie wide receivers, especially that don't have a big role like a Malik Nabers, sometimes there's an adjustment to the NFL. But McMillan down the stretch, he was a difference maker. If you were able to pick him back up, and I did, I think in 1 or 2 leagues, but I drafted him in a lot of leagues, had to cut him. It sucks because you're like, well, I was on the right path, but you can't. You're going to have regretful cuts. It's just part of fantasy, any fantasy sport. But we saw McMillan down the stretch. And so what was it, 7 touchdowns in the last 5 games?
Like 5 games. It's ridiculous.
So what I'm here, when I hear you talk about Godwin, my immediate thought goes, all right, Gene is looking at McMillan late.
Big time looking at him late and hoping that people just completely forget that he's out there. Because I believe that this offense could resemble something similar to what they looked like when they had AB in the fold. And all 3 of those guys, plus a Gronk, were able to be fantasy relevant. I think they can get back to that. Now, they're dealing with a new offensive coordinator, but the quarterback's the same. The offense is going to be the same. It's just going to be the way in which he calls it. And you can't just put McMillan back in the jar, right? You can't just say, okay, break glass in case of emergency. Now you've seen it. He's valuable. You're going to have to find a way to implement him into this offense. And that could mean like dividends for all 3, but it also could mean that the first 2 guys have a little bit of a dip in their production.
Yeah, I definitely would take him late. Like you said, Godwin, you're going to have to pay a pretty high price to get him. I think there's going to be excitement. So definitely something to keep an eye on. But we've seen the Buccaneers offense just 2 years in a row now. People were worried about the change in offensive coordinator last year. And even with the injuries, it didn't matter. Baker Mayfield had another good year. So you're seeing Baker Mayfield go as a top 10 quarterback as well. We saw Evan Engram go to the Broncos, and some people are really excited for this move. We knew that the Broncos were going to be in the market, whether it was the draft or free agency, for a tight end in this Sean Payton offense. Now, when you look at Engram, he's had a couple of really big seasons here with Jacksonville. 2 years ago, 114 receptions, doesn't score a ton of touchdowns, and also put up some of those big numbers when key players were out last year, dealt with a lot of injuries. But do you like this fit for Engram in Denver, and do you think it could translate into top 7 fantasy tight end?
I think a receiving tight end in Denver is going to result in a good outcome. I don't even care if it's Evan Engram. I do think it's interesting because if they didn't get Engram, I had Harold Fannin as a guy who could fall to Denver, which I thought would be a perfect landing spot for him. Possibly still could be a great landing spot for him. I don't think you need just one nowadays. Look at the Jaguars. They had Strange and Engram out there. Engram got hurt. Strange came in. Engram became, expendable. But I like what Engram brings to the table because he is an elite level athlete at the position. And anytime you have elite level athleticism and you put it in an offense predicated on bigger, stronger receivers out there on the perimeter, it gives you a lot of like area to work the middle. and I think that'll be great for Engram. He still has his occasional dropsies, but you have to live with those things. I really never understood why people lose their mind over drops. Like, they're going to happen, ladies and gentlemen. Nobody catches 100% of them. Just look at the catch percentages of the highest targeted wide receivers, and it'll tell you it's not always rosy. But when they do catch it, they normally do special things with it, and that's Evan Engram. He's done that since he was a Giant back in the day, and he's probably going to do that if he's healthy with Denver.
Yeah, he's certainly. I think there's some people that are really excited for Engram here. And I probably would not take him top 6, top 7 tight end, probably a little bit after that. But certainly looks like he could put up some numbers as far as receptions, touchdowns.
Judging by last year, it's not hard to be a top 10 tight end.
Stay healthy and get like 5 touchdowns usually. Yeah. That's the thing though with Engram. He had 6 touchdowns his rookie year. He hasn't had more than 4 since. So
no, he's definitely a PPR tight end.
Yes, that is for sure. And PPR, more appealing. Non-PPR, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because we just haven't seen the touchdowns. And make sure you check us out, fantasylife.com. We have everything you need, whether it's mock drafts, draft profiles, the Dwayne McFarland model for rookies. The draft kit is already being put out. It's never too early. You want to get a head start to dominate your competition. We know people are doing some best ball drafts early as well. And some people might think that is crazy. We don't even know where these rookies are landing, but you can get some value. Like any sport that I do, I want to draft early. I understand in this situation, we might draft a rookie and he's in a bad landing spot, but you can also get values because we know it's going to change. I mean, I do a lot of fantasy baseball, and I can tell you right now, because the season starts on Thursday, there are guys that were being drafted this week in like round 8 or 9 that just 2 weeks ago were round 14. So it's going to be the same thing in fantasy football. If you're ahead of the curve, you're following us at Fantasy Life, you're going to be able to get some of those values, especially if you do a lot of leagues, a lot of best ball drafts, it pays right now to pay attention, and we got you covered at Fantasy Life, Gene.
Yeah, for sure. Anything that you want, if you want to be analytical about it, we definitely have you over at Fantasy Life. If you want guys who really like look at it from more of a practical standpoint, I tend to be more like looking at games and situations. If you want someone that does that, we've got you over there for it. If you want people who are just out there giving you the most outlandish ways to think about things, we've got that over there for you. Every angle that you want, we've got it over there at Fantasy Life. It's a fantastic team of people who really love what they do and take pride in it. So it's awesome.
Definitely. So make sure you check it out, and there'll be content every single day. We never sleep here at Fantasy Life. The Colts, they bring in Daniel Jones, and there's talk that it could be a competition with Anthony Richardson. And we know Richardson's been up and down, but at the same time, like, really hasn't had much of a chance. We haven't seen him a lot, got hurt his rookie year. We know Richardson, what he can do on the ground, but what are your thoughts? When you saw Daniel Jones was going to Indianapolis, what was your reaction?
This is much to do about nothing. That was my initial thought. I didn't look at it and say, oh my God, this is really going to be competition, because I don't think Daniel Jones has ever won a competition. I remember when he supposedly was in a quarterback competition with Tyrod Taylor in with the Giants, and Tyrod Taylor thoroughly outplayed him throughout the training camp and into the preseason, and they still gave the job to Daniel Jones. I just think he's what should be a really good backup in the NFL. We've seen what his ceiling is, and his ceiling is when he is limited on throwing the ball, he can use his legs to get out of trouble and to be a weapon in the run game. That's where he's at his best. Well, is he going to be better than that? Like better at that than Anthony Richardson is? If Anthony Richardson is really given the full latitude to be able to do that job, I just don't see it. Like if they're asked to go out and do the exact same thing, Anthony Richardson is going to be better at that thing than Daniel Jones is. I just don't. I think this is a move to have another veteran in the fold so that if something happens with Anthony Richardson, we have a capable guy to come in and play football.
Like, what do we make of Richardson right now? We saw 4 games in his rookie year. Okay, we really can't take away anything from 4 games. We saw 11 games this year, completion percentage 47.7%, 8 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, had 6 rushing touchdowns, 499 rushing yards on 86 carries. Have we seen enough to make a judgment? Do we need a full season? Like, where are we on Anthony Richardson right now?
I don't think we've seen enough to make a full, like, to give an evaluation on who he's going to be. Never forget, he's still the youngest quarterback in the NFL. When all of these quarterbacks get drafted, he's still going to be the youngest quarterback in the NFL. He's still going to be the most inexperienced quarterback in the NFL. Like, he just hasn't played a lot of football, and at some point that's not going to be an excuse anymore, right? Like, I get that. But it's still an excuse. Like, it's still a viable excuse. I look to week 11 last year when he came back after being benched against the Jets. Jets with a decent defense, went 20 for 30 for 272 yards and a touchdown. That to me, and then 2 rushing touchdowns as well. That to me is what you're thinking can be what he can eventually get you to on a regular basis. And if he can get you to that on a regular basis in fantasy, he's a top 5 fantasy quarterback. Like, that he's going to be one of those ones. It's just, can he get there? And I'm interested to see what happens if with an off season to train and not have to like rehab and going into a system where maybe there is a little bit of, pressure back there that Daniel Jones could possibly come and usurp me. But I hope that just propels him to be better. I want to see him be successful. I want to see Daniel Jones have a successful career as a backup and possibly get another chance. I just don't think that chance is here in Indianapolis.
Yeah, Richardson last year was extremely expensive. He was going 5th, 6th quarterback off the board. So at that price, I wasn't buying it. And then one of my last drafts, you know how you always think, well, what if he hits? Like, what if he has this big season, the rushing yards, and he improves as a passer? And one of my last drafts, it was like QB9, QB10. He was there. I said, all right, I'll take a shot. Obviously, it didn't work out. But right now, looking at the consensus rankings on fantasylife.com, he's QB22. Like, at that point, I'm going to take – that's what I want in my backup quarterback, right? I know someone who – we already know he can run. And we've talked about how the running quarterbacks just are extremely valuable in fantasy. He costs nothing. You're taking him as a backup quarterback. And if you don't see signs of improvement in the first few weeks, he's an easy cut, and you move on to maybe a quarterback in that similar range that is off to a good start. To me, at that price, like, I don't see the harm in it, especially you're not relying on it. He's your backup. And we've seen this before. You have your good starting quarterback and you take a backup quarterback, put him on the bench. And there are occasions where maybe that backup quarterback eventually becomes your starter if things break right. To me, like, there's no downside in taking Richardson as the QB22 off the board.
Yeah, no downside whatsoever. And quite honestly, it's a smart move to take him, especially if it's not going to cost you any draft value. Like, it just, to me, when you see someone that young in that situation, you've got to be able to, like, say, I'm willing to put him on the bench and wait to see. Because if it becomes great, then great. And if it doesn't, then who cares, right? There's no harm, no foul in it. And I think those are the best types of moves to make, when you can just look like a genius without actually doing anything genius, right? So that's my favorite thing. Like, yeah, I had him on my roster. I just knew. When in reality, you're like, I didn't really know, but it didn't hurt anything. And then obviously, if you're in, if you're playing Superflex leagues, then he's a player.
That one is a little bit more risky. So if you're in a Superflex league, you're comfortable starting him as your second quarterback in a Superflex league every week? Yeah.
If I believe he's going to be what I saw after the benching.
Right. Okay.
If he's going to be what I saw after the benching, then yeah, sign me up. Does he have to go for 2 rushing touchdowns and 270 something yards every week? No. But week 13, he only had 109 passing yards, but 2 touchdowns. He had 48 rushing yards and a touchdown. Matter of fact, the last 3 games that he played that last year, 48 yards rushing a touchdown, 46 yards rushing a touchdown, 70 yards and a touchdown. Like, I'm going to take the chances that the passing part of it will be good enough, because not a lot of guys at quarterback's going to give me that as a rusher.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm going to have to examine this because I play in a few Superflex leagues, and my general strategy is I take one quarterback early, and I tend to wait and try and find the value. 2 years ago, I had Jordan Love as my second quarterback, and that was a home run. I was able to win the league. This past year, I didn't win the league. I don't even remember who was my second quarterback. I can't even remember. So obviously, I probably did not hit on that second quarterback. Oh, no, actually. So I typically don't draft 3 quarterbacks in a Superflex league, but that league expanded the rosters, and there's no kickers or defense. So I think it was 16 rounds. And this was, I didn't see this coming. I'm not trying to say I did, but this was before J.J. McCarthy got hurt. I took Sam Darnold in round 15. So that worked out. But I don't deserve credit for that, because McCarthy was still healthy at the time. So yeah. I just said, all right, there's a chance Darnold is the starting quarterback. I like O'Connell in the system. Let me take a chance. So it wound up being Darnold, and I can't even remember who my starting quarterback was. But typically, though, my blueprint for Superflex League is because there are people who will draft 2 quarterbacks in the first 3 rounds. And I typically don't like doing that, especially when you're starting 3 receivers, 2 running backs, and an extra flex. I'm trying to find that value at quarterback. So based on the rankings here, Richardson kind of falls in that pocket. And I have to figure out if I'm comfortable with that as he's my guy going in. And I think maybe at that point, too, I guess you probably would take a third quarterback. The only issue for me with that is sometimes people in these leagues, they take that third quarterback like round 9, round 10. I can't do that. That's investing too much where you're passing up, good players in round 9 or 10. Like Brian Thomas was in that range last year. I can't pass someone up like that for a third quarterback.
Not at all. But do you think that people out there will be willing to take Anthony Richardson? Can you possibly get him way down the line of where you would normally get a second quarterback, because people don't want to take the risk of having him in? I think that's where you might be able to find the value at. There may be people out there, not people like me, but people out there going, hey, I'm not touching Anthony Richardson. Yeah. I just don't trust it. I don't know. I'm going to go with a safer pick. And then now you've got Anthony Richardson sitting there, like just waiting to be plucked in the late rounds, or maybe not even plucked at all.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think we're going to have to gauge the temperature, because I'm not really sure where people are at. So I'll start, looking at the early ADP and see where he goes. Now, the ADP for a single quarterback league is different. We know that. So if you're talking Superflex, but that is definitely something I'm going to have to examine, because that's the area where I kind of like to dip in for my second quarterback, in that like 18 to 24 range. So looking at the consensus rankings here, Penix is below Richardson. If I remember, you're pretty high on Penix for this year, right?
Yeah, I think he's going to have a fantastic year. I think he might be. I mean, he could be resurrection for a name that I will not say. We'll just say.
Okay.
I've decided to never say his name again, but I think Penix is going to be really good. I think he'll unlock the vertical passing game, which we haven't seen in Atlanta in a while. I think he'll unlock that vertical passing game, make it more viable. That's going to open up the underneath stuff. It's going to make it's going to make everybody working within that system a lot better. And there's still the part of him being a runner that he's going to have to use more than he did in college, because in the NFL, everybody can rush the passer and everybody can get to you if you're back there like a statue. So he'll use his running ability more than he did those last 2 years in Washington. It won't be to the level that he used it at Indiana, but it'll definitely be a weapon for him to unleash every once in a while.
What the hell are my Cowboys doing? Like, I am so depressed as a Cowboys fan now. Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, they freed up money in salary cap space and have done nothing. Like, what the hell is this team doing?
Well, first off, I don't understand why you would see what Rico Dowdle did last year.
Thank you.
And then decide I'm going to just change running backs. Like, I could understand if you said I was going to go into the draft and get one of these other guys to like pair with him. But when you didn't have a quarterback and you didn't have a lot of receiving options, he went out there and became a legitimate running back, like a legitimate running back. Something like flipped in his brain and he went, oh snap, I can run. I'm really good at this. And he looked good. He looked like a winner. And then you just said, nah, go somewhere else. Like, I don't understand that. And how did he end up where he went? Like, a lot of these moves don't make any sense, but the Cowboys are teetering on malpractice, I would say.
They are. And it was the same contract, Javonte Williams and Rico Dowdle. So I don't understand what they're doing, but hey, that's why I play fantasy football and I bet so I can hopefully win a championship there, win some money there, because boy, the Cowboys are not doing it right now. Last year, I had no confidence going into the year. I didn't think they were good. I couldn't believe, I think at one point they might have been favored to win the division. I'm like, the Eagles are better than the Cowboys. Like, what are we doing? So that's the one thing. I will never speak from a fan's perspective. I see so many fans that are so optimistic about the team. You got to be realistic, especially when you're talking fantasy and betting. That's how you lose. I just told you, Malik Nabers, I hate the Giants, right? But I want to win my fantasy league. Malik Nabers, I was taking early second round. I'll take Eagles. I had a lot of A.J. Brown last year. I think sometimes that's what I talk to people and they say they don't play fantasy. Well, I can't draft someone from my rival. No, it's about winning. So, yeah, but I'm as down on the Cowboys right now as can be. Once again, I'm just sick of this offseason. So we got to get off this topic. We got to be more positive. So right now I want to take a look at the latest mock draft from Gene Clemons. You can find it, fantasylife.com. And, Gene, before we get into it, what is your process here? Is this what you think the teams will do, what you will do? How do you formulate this mock draft and put it together?
Well, first, I don't believe in trades because, I feel like trades are cop-outs. I can't think of who to pick here, so I'm just going to trade it away. Some people think that it's smarter to trade away a pick, but to me, I want to know what you think as a GM when you have to sit in that seat. I don't want to know what you think the GM is thinking.
All right, with that said, number 1, Tennessee, Travis Hunter. What do you like about him, and what do you think his role will be in the NFL? We know he can play receiver and corner. Where do you think he plays mostly, or does he do both?
So if the Titans really wanted to get a generational talent, and they were going to take a generational talent at one, there's only one generational talent in this draft. We've seen Abdul Carter's before. We've never seen a Travis Hunter. So I think that the good thing about the NFL is that it's a slower game in college. You're going to run less plays. I could see him on a 75-75 split on the offense and defensive side, and he would probably still play much less snaps than he did in college. I think that's a great way to utilize him on both sides of the ball. There are packages where you may not have him out there playing corner. There are packages where you wouldn't have him out there playing wide receiver. But the upside and what you get on both sides of the ball is something that can't be ignored.
Number 2, you have Ashton Jeanty going to Cleveland. This is something I have not seen anywhere else.
Yeah, I like to zig when people zag. If you remember the Baker, I think it was the Baker Mayfield draft that Saquon Barkley went second. At that time, I thought the play was for them to draft Saquon Barkley at number 1 and then turn around and draft Lamar Jackson. I thought the Lamar Jackson Saquon Barkley combination would be the most deadly combination ever put together in football. And so now they have an opportunity to get the number 1 running back in the draft in an offense that should be predicated on running based off of their style, their defense, and their weather, and then come back in the second round and snatch up a quarterback then. And if anybody noticed, in the second round, I have them taking Jalen Milroe. So they get that that running combination of a Milroe, who's a high-level runner, ran a 4.3 something unofficial at his pro day, and you get Ashton Jeanty, a guy who understands how to run, play through contact, and can be a home run hitter for you. I think it's a great combination.
We're going over the latest mock draft from Gene Clemons. You can check it out on fantasylife.com. We talked about the first two picks. Number 3, the New York Giants. Who you have going to New York?
I took Shadur Sanders at number 3. I know a lot of people are on the Cam Ward is the number 1 quarterback in the draft. I know this sounds crazy, but I think a lot of that is just for some reason a dislike or vitriol for the Sanders name, and let's just put anyone that we possibly can be there other than him. But I really do think that Shadur Sanders is the most pro-ready quarterback to come out in quite some time. I had said before that I thought it was in the last 10 years that he's the most pro-ready, and everybody thought that I meant like he's the best passer or the best runner. And I was like, no, he's the best suited to be able to handle the lifestyle and the scrutiny that comes with playing quarterback in the NFL. And so I don't think that that's lost on me that he would be able to go to New York, where there's going to be a lot of criticism, a lot of second guessing, a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking going on. And he has the chops to be able to handle it, because he's handled it ever since he was in youth league and he walked on the field and people said, oh, you're just out here because your dad is Deion Sanders. They're still saying that today, which is crazy to me.
What are the biggest concerns for him? Because like you said, there's a lot of people who are really down on him and don't think he should be drafted this early. If there's anything that you are concerned about, what would it be?
The only concern that I have for him is the hero ball. I think that and it's not like unique to him. There are a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL right now that are still playing hero ball. I just don't think he is the best at it. Like, I think he is better when he keeps his time and his rhythm. Not saying that he can't like make things happen. He can. But I think it's better for him when he stays on rhythm. When he starts falling into that, I'm going to drift back, and try to make something happen. He doesn't have the requisite level of athleticism to be able to escape in that particular instance. He's better when he's moving up in the pocket and then he escapes going north and south, or when he goes laterally to make more time. I think that'll be something he'll work on, something he's going to get better at. But it is a point of contention for me right now when I look at the film on him.
You mentioned Cam Ward. You have him dropping to 9 to the Saints. What are some of the issues with him? Because it sounds like you're not as high on him as some others.
Oh, no. To me, it's not a not being high on Cam. It's I love Shadur. I love Cam Ward. I think Shadur Sanders is just the better like quarterback than Cam Ward is. But I think Cam Ward has a lot of talent. And the reason he dropped is because when you look at the draft, where else is he going, right? Is like the Vegas already has a guy. The Jets just picked up a guy. Carolina has a guy. But the Saints, do they have a guy? And I love that pairing for him to go down there and work with that new regime and be a Dak Prescott-like type of guy down there in New Orleans.
We've seen tight ends in recent years make immediate impacts. That wasn't the case years ago, and it looks like Tyler Warren could be the next one this year. You have him going 14 to the Colts. How excited would you be for him in fantasy for the upcoming year?
It would be an interesting place for him in fantasy, because I think that what we'll see is them start to rely on that guy to be Warren instead of being a small slot receiver. I think Warren would replace all of those targets that we saw going to those slot guys over the last year or two. I think he's big, he's athletic, he has an ability to break tackles. He brings a lot of dynamics to the case, and he's a security blanket for a quarterback that's trying to get it right.
Yeah, certainly would help Richardson there, and we cannot be afraid to draft these rookie tight ends. There were some people last year that were a little concerned about Brock Bowers, the landing spot. I certainly was, and I just wish I had more of them in fantasy. I did have them in a league or two, but obviously we look back like, damn, should have taken it. But I could see Warren being drafted for sure as a top 10 tight end this year, especially depending on landing spot. But I think regardless, as we mentioned earlier, with tight ends, you really don't need to have a massive year. As long as you're involved and score some touchdowns, you'll be pretty good. So you can check out the rest of the mock draft at fantasylife.com, as well as our early fantasy football draft kit. I'll be back with Kendall Valenzuela next Sunday. Have a great day.